It's such a draining thing dealing with children. This is a No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Matt.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Lisa. And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is episode 5 of season 5. We couldn't leave Bly Manor behind after just one episode. So join us as we do a watch through of The Haunting of Bly Manor. This episode, we are jumping in with episodes 2 and 3. If you didn't hear our discussion of the first episode of Bly Manor, you can find that in No Fear episode 503. So I think originally did not plan to do a watch through of this. We had done in our summer series, we like to just kind of have a little bit more fun and be a little bit more relaxed. And one summer we did The Haunting of Hill House, the Mike Flanagan TV show based on the Shirley Jackson novel that's on Netflix. And that was so much fun that when The Haunting of Bly Manor came out, we thought, well, why don't we just watch the first episode and talk about it just as something kind of fun to do? We did it so it would coincide with Halloween, and we thought that sounded kind of fun and it would be, seasonally appropriate. Well, I mean, listeners, as you can tell, we properly got hooked on the TV show, as I guessed we would. So we're now going to do our little watch through of The Haunting of Bly Manor. So just a little bit about the 2 episodes we're talking about today. Bly Manor episode 2 is titled The Pupil. That is obviously based on the Henry James story. I think they're all based, like all the titles are Henry James short stories. I haven't looked at all of them yet. But this one was originally published in 1891. And then Bly Manor episode 3 is The Two Faces part 1, which now looking at that title, I realize we probably should have been smart and put 3 and 4 together, but oh well. So that one is based on Henry James's story, The Two Faces, which first appeared in Harper's Bazaar, December 1900. So it fits with as we're getting into December, I guess we'll pretend anyway. Okay, so this was I've only seen these first 3 episodes. I'm the one kind of taking my time through this. I have a feeling, Matt and Mel, have y'all gotten ahead of me on this show? Like, have you watched this multiple times now?
Yes. Yes.
I thought
so. I believe I was probably the first to finish because Mel and I were texting just after I'd finished it, and she still had like an episode or 2 to go. But I believe she's finished it as well. And also, I did want to make a just kind of side note, Lisa. Don't worry about The Two Faces part 1. The Two Faces part 2 is not the next episode. It
it's a few episodes later. Yeah.
Well, just then I'm guessing we didn't have to do 3 and 4 together. Okay, I feel better now.
so don't worry about it. Just wanted to point that out. But yes, I have finished the whole series and am now going back through it again for this watch through. And I will definitely try to avoid spoilers for you for future events, just since you're watching it as we're recording this. Also, probably worth noting for the listeners that yes, there will be spoilers as we discuss the episodes. I mean, I feel that's probably obvious, but definitely just worth saying aloud. But yeah, I really liked it. I'm still thinking about whether or not I think this is better than Haunting of Hill House or not. They both have some good things about them, but yeah, I've seen it. Mel, did you want to chime in too?
Sure. Yeah, I finished it. I think I actually stayed up well past my bedtime that night when you and I recorded Tremors and we're talking about it, and just went ahead and knocked it out and watched like 4 episodes. But yeah, so this was my second time watching these 2 episodes. So yeah, us watching it for the podcast will be my second time going through again. And I don't know, I might watch it another time as well, because I'm realizing I knew this would be the case, but there's just so much more I'm noticing now going back to the beginning, after having gone all the way through. And I too go back and forth. I kind of feel like I might like The Haunting of Hill House a little better, but I don't want that to take, I don't know. I like each of them for slightly different reasons, I suppose. Um, so I'm interested in seeing how I feel about the two of them next to each other when I finish Bly Manor again, and kind of get a feel for it from beginning to end without just kind of discovering things as each episode happened.
Well, I mean, I'm only 3 episodes in. I'm kind of on the fence about it. As far, I don't know. I think I do like this better than The Haunting of Hill House, honestly. But again, I'm only 3 episodes in, and y'all are a lot farther than me. So, um, I don't know. I'm a sucker for dollhouses. I'm a sucker for creepy dolls. And this, oh gosh, episode 2 delivered. Delivered on the creepy children. Episode 3, I mean, we'll talk about episode 3. We get a little bit more backstory, which I think we need, because we get a lot. We get kind of Miss Jessel's and Peter Quint's backstory a little bit more. And we get a little bit of backstory of Miles in episode 2. But yeah, let's just dive in and talk about it, because episode 2, it starts, of course, we ended episode 1 just kind of as a recap with Danny locked in the closet. And she has, a panic attack pretty much, and she's very scared, and she sees the Matt, I think you called him headlight eyes.
Flashlight eyes. Yeah.
Flashlight eyes. Okay. Flashlight eyes in the last episode. She sees him in mirrors, and so, okay, she sees there's a mirror. There's like one of those full length mirrors in the closet, and she gets scared. And so when we open on episode 2, it's the next morning, and she's disciplining the children as they need to be, and she ends up giving them chores. There are these muddy footprints all throughout the house that keep leading to the forbidden wing, and that I'm curious to see what they do with that, because when we get to episode 3 and we get the flashback with Miss Jessel, we realize that the muddy footprints have been happening for a long time. So I'm guessing, he's building towards something with that. But anyway, um, we get Miles kind of acting out, and he throws that little creepy black doll that has lived under the dresser in Flora's room. He throws it down, I guess, a laundry chute, and it ends up in the cellar, which Flora tells us right away is perfectly dreadful. And I've never thought hearing those two words together could be so like terrifying, but she has spent so much time saying perfectly splendid that when she says it's perfectly dreadful, for some reason that just hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. But this is where I just really kind of fall in love with this show, right? So they're talking about the cellar, and there are no lights in the cellar, of course, except until you get all the way down the stairs, and Danny has to like pull one of those kind of bare bulb type situations. And of course, the little creepy doll is there, but it looks like it's sitting waiting for her. And then, okay, this is what I love about both of these seasons, The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, is the way he pans across rooms, and he'll do those like circle shots a lot, where you see different things every time the camera kind of like swings around to a new corner of the room, but he forces you to like stop and look at everything, because if you're just focused on what's happening in the center of the frame, you're gonna miss it. And in this case, it wasn't explained in this episode, but in the cellar, there is just a pile of dolls, just like piled there. It was terrifying. I mean, at that point, I was like giggling gleefully. And I was also very happy I was watching it at 10 a.m. in the morning because if I had been watching it at night, when usually sit down to watch things, I think I would have lost it.
Well, especially when
But
the doll had
anyway,
moved.
yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, that goes without saying. He didn't have to have the doll head move, but um yeah, the way he's playing with dolls in this, I love. And we learn too in, I guess it's episode 3. Yeah, it is in episode 3 why the doll is black. And that the dolls do represent people, and that one does represent Miss Jessel because she said her favorite colors were all the colors. And Miles told Flora that all the colors mixed together make black. So she made a black doll because it was all the colors, which is a lovely sentiment and also terrifying. um, well, I guess, I don't know. We need to talk a little bit about Miles's background, I think. And what we learn about his, because we get that most of episode 2 follows his schooling and I guess his subsequent expulsion from his school. This, of course, comes from Henry James's The Pupil. Have you read The Pupil, Mel?
I have not. And actually, I don't even think I'd heard of The Pupil until I realized that a lot of these titles were Henry James stories. I just assumed my first watch through that it was going off of Miles in the Turn the Screw being expelled and trying to give some sort of backstory for that, which you don't actually get in the book. So I'm going to have to check out The Pupil.
Yeah, I think a lot of that came from the Turn of the Screw. I think you're right. I think he's giving a backstory there. But one thing to kind of point out, and I'm not sure I may be reading way too deeply into this, but one thing so The Pupil isn't really a ghost story. It's more of, so what happens is there's this really just weird, like this wealthy family, but they're not like the nicest of people. Their names are the Marines. And there's a little boy, he's 11 years old in the story. His name is Morgan. And the family gets him a private tutor because he's sick and he's bedridden part of the time because he has like a heart condition. And there are a couple of things, I reread the story after I watched this episode, and there were a couple of things that stood out to me that I just kind of want to point out just because it's interesting, I think. But Morgan is described, so the boy in the story is described as being supernaturally clever, which I think fits Miles really well in this. But then there's also this like family language that he calls it, where like the family has their own way of kind of speaking, and different phrases take on different meanings. Anyway, they call it the family language ultramarine. And Morgan has to like explain it to his tutor. Of course, I mean, you can't really spoil a story that was published in 1891, but the little boy dies at the end of the story. But it's more about how his tutor is trying to like basically like save this boy from a really horrible family. This really like smart boy, this really kind boy, but you know, the tutor is worried that his family's going to have an influence on him. Anyway, I just bring that up because so much of like how the family like speaks, and especially you know, the everything is perfectly splendid, or you know, they tend to have these phrases. I don't know if I may be reaching too much there, but anyway, let's talk a little bit about Miles at school, because I don't know if I was the only one picking this up, but I think Flanagan was really tipping his hat a lot to The Omen.
Ooh, that's a good point. I hadn't been a while since I've seen The Omen, but I can see some parallels there.
Yeah, I can too. It's interesting though because it's like there's two reasons. I mean, there's a reason why Miles is doing what he's doing that's completely different. But yeah, some of the imagery and the themes, I could see that. I hadn't thought of it before, but I could see it.
Well, I mean, you're right. The reasons for why he's wanting to come home. Um, of course, we don't get until like the whole like school thing is over when he opens that note from Flora, because you see him get it at the very beginning of the whole school sequence, but he doesn't actually show it to the camera until the end, and you realize he's doing everything to kind of help his sister. Um, but that's why I brought up the Henry James story, The Pupil, too, because of that phrase supernaturally clever, because you can kind of see, and Miles even says it, at several points, which you don't know until you get to episode 3 what it all means. But when he's talking about, I was looking for your key,
Hmm.
like you realize that he is so clever, he knows how to manipulate people. And so he's doing things he doesn't necessarily want to do, but he's doing it in order to get a certain outcome. Which is, it's both kind of sweet and terrifying at the same time when you realize like how smart Miles is and how he's able to manipulate people to do what he wants, and how he's willing to kind of push aside any sort of moral things to get what he wants to, even though what he wants is something good. He wants to help his sister. But yeah, when he was, I think just the look of him, the look of the actor who plays Miles with the dark hair and the blue eyes and the pale skin, and then especially seeing him dressed in that school uniform, I was getting real strong Omen vibes. And then when he was up in the tree and you see everybody shouting at him, kind of like, "What are you doing?" Um, that just, I don't know, that reminded me of it. So I don't know. Again, maybe I'm reaching. Maybe, but that's why I like these shows, because I feel like I can dig deep into them and try to figure it out. But yeah. So I don't know. Should we talk about some of the things Miles does?
Well,
Oh, you
he
mean the?
definitely. Oh, go
Oh,
ahead, Matt.
sorry. Well, I was just going to make a snarky comment about the proto serial killer things that he does.
Yes.
like,
Yeah, I was
like
just going to say
watching,
he escalates, but yes.
yeah, yeah. It was a little easier for me to watch the second time through, just because the first time I watched it, like I kept getting such, like I was so uncomfortable because it was this whole like watching it, I was like, wow, this kid is like 6 months away from being a serial killer if he keeps going down this road, like it just made me really uncomfortable to watch that happening. Knowing what I do from the rest of the show, it was a little easier, but it's still fairly uncomfortable because he does some ill things.
Yeah, the second time watching it, I was much more cognizant of, and again, I mean, it's a child actor, but and there are also things that I was very impressed by. Like watching it the second time, I could tell much better when he's possessed and when he's not. And I thought the ways that they handled that and the ways that he did that as an actor were really fascinating to me. But when he's escalating his violence, you can tell at certain times if you look closely at his face that he doesn't really want to be doing this. When he's choking out his friend, he's actually kind of crying. And I think when I first watched it, I just was assuming that Miles was kind of bad or evil because that's one of the implications of Turn the Screws. So I just automatically thought, well, yeah, like you said, Matt, Miles is going to be a serial killer. Like this is, or Miles is already possessed or whatever. But once you get further along, you realize what was going on in the background. And I think Miles's choices, while still terrifying and like, wow, you're really good at, being amoral. Um, I do think there's some pain there that I think he shows when he talks to Father Stack and he says, I'm sorry. I needed to find your key. That's all. That he does feel remorse like Father Stack wants him to, but he can't show it because his whole purpose is to get expelled, to go home to help take care of uh, Flora, which, not to be too much of a spoiler, but is probably what Peter Quint wanted the whole time. So, I mean, he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I thought it was really cool what they did with demon possession in Miles, because you can see this kid already knows what's possible, because he keeps talking about how, do you have free will? Can you stop someone from possessing you? And that's just heartbreaking when you watch it the second time through.
Yeah, well, the idea too of how far like Quint has control over him, because he's already at that point using Quint's like language, like the idea of the key, and he's kind of taken on his teachings. And so then you think, well, is this just a young man who has learned something that, is not necessarily the healthiest thing, like how to manipulate people? Or has Quint already taken hold at that point too? Um, Especially because I had forgotten that he asked the question about the the free will. That's a heavy lesson, by the way, I thought, to teach. I was like, when I realized that they were like, in a religious class, which, I mean, of course they were being taught by a priest, but they're immediately being taught about like demons being driven out into pigs, and then the herd of pig. Are they herd of pigs? Flocks of pigs?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a herd of pigs.
A grouping, I don't know.
A group of, well, anyway, all the pigs commit suicide basically, and I was just like, I can't believe that's what the lesson they're choosing to teach people, teaching these kids. Yeah, and he kind of summed it up, the priest did, when he said evil exists, but it needs our permission. And then you kind of wonder, has he given his permission? Is that what he's wondering? I don't know. It is heartbreaking. You're right.
Well, and you also have two terrifying quotes that one of them comes up again later in the series when Miles asks why he can't see his parents anymore, why they don't come back. We know at that point that, at that point, the parents are dead, Quint's gone, Jessel's dead, and Miles asks Father Stack if his parents are coming back, and he's like, no, they're not. And Miles said, well, why do the bad ones get to come back? And then right before he gets expelled, he says, dead doesn't mean gone. And that's something that he and Flora say a lot. And every time these little children say dead doesn't mean gone, I'm like, shivering, because it's just, it's one of those moments where you're not sure, you know where they stand and how they are as kids by the end. I'm not going to spoil that, but there's those moments when they say these things and you're just like, I'm disturbed by this child, but there's a lot of backstory to it.
Well, and the Father Stack did give him the Bible verse that he thought was going to help him when he said it was John 16:22. Now it is your time of sorrow, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one can take your joy from you. So that kind of echoes that idea that you're going through a hard time right now, but you're going to be reunited. And when I heard them say that in this, I was like, oh, that's going to be nothing good by the end. I felt bad. Father Stack was such a good character because, and I think he was supposed to be the teacher from the pupil. The one who really kind of cared about his student and who wanted to see him like do good things and not be brought down by his family and his home life. And Father Stack, yeah, he was such a good kid. He didn't deserve what he got. And his little Pidge didn't deserve what he got either.
I agree. He was a good character. It's one of those characters that I would have loved to have seen more of, but obviously, there's no real ability to bring that character back after Miles leaves school. No way to do it organically, I guess. But I really liked him.
Yeah, I mean, well, he just, he was just kind. He was kind and he was caring, and so often when you see that, like that structure of, here's an all boys school and it's, Catholic and it's run by priests. Like you see, I don't know, you don't always, that doesn't always end up being a good dynamic. Either it's an abusive situation or, I don't know, maybe I just grew up like watching too much like School Ties and things like that. But, um,
I
yeah,
kind
I
of
don't, yeah,
assumed
he
it
was,
was I kind of assumed it was an Anglican establishment, but I could be wrong about that.
I have no idea.
'Cause they never said, I don't think. Yeah.
No.
Do
Yeah, I guess you
Anglican
can't tell from
priests
the
wear
collar.
collars like that?
I
That's
have
a
no
legitimate.
idea.
Episcopalians do, and it's about the same thing, right?
No, yeah, I guess you're right.
So it could have been an
Okay.
Episcopalian church, I just assumed because they're Britain, it would be Anglican,
No,
but
if it was
No, you're probably
England, it
right with
probably would
that.
be.
I mean, I'm
Okay.
not
It
an
probably would be
expert. That's just what
Anglican.
I was thinking. I could be completely wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah. I will just tell our listeners right now, I did not grow up Catholic or Anglican or Episcopalian or anything related, so I can't offer my expertise. I just see a collar and I think priest. Oh gosh, my British literature should have taught me better. Well, yeah, we end this episode. Yeah, because you do see the young serial killer escalating. So first he harms himself by breaking his arm. Then we see him almost killing another child because he's fighting with a kid and he chokes him until he passes out. And again, Father Stack breaks it up. And then finally he kills Father Stack's bird because he's like that. That has to get me out. Um, and it was very creepy when they were all in the office trying to get him to say he was sorry, and he finally says, "I'm sorry," and then there's a pause, and he says, "I didn't do worse." And at that moment, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" But then you see the letter from Flora, and it says, "Come home," and it's like, "Oh, okay." He was trying to get expelled. So that's the end of episode 2. No, it's not.
no, we go back into
No,
the
because we
present
get home.
again.
We
Yeah,
did go. Oh yeah.
because they're being punished and they're doing all the chores.
They are being punished, and I just wanted to point out that I loved the fact that they put a Monster Squad poster up in his room.
Yes.
That was a fun detail. I would have liked to have known Miles before he went, creepy kid. But that fits, I guess, like kids against supernatural creatures. That's kind of the vibe we get. Oh, okay. Y'all tell me, are we gonna know why Miss Gross keeps seeing a crack in the wall that goes away?
Oh yeah, we'll find
Yes.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we like? No, don't answer it. Never mind.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you anything about that because
I have my theories. I have my theories that because there have been a couple of things already in the first 3 episodes that I've wondered because he moves back and forth. Flanagan moves back and forth in time so much, and he doesn't give you clear markers when he's moving back and forth. And I've wondered if some of these scenes we're seeing are not in the time we think we're seeing them in. But I won't say anything else because I don't want you to tip me off in any way. So let's move past that.
I can't wait until we can talk about it because I have so many thoughts and feelings, but I will not say anything.
We get a little bit more of Danny's background with the broken glasses because Flora is cleaning Danny's room, to try to help. And Danny walks in on her wearing the glasses and has a full-on panic attack. I'm guessing that has to do with Flashlight Eyes. We still don't know who Flashlight Eyes is in this point. I'm guessing you do, which is weird.
Again, not saying anything about that.
Yeah, we can't give anything away.
Dang it, you guys.
Well, you would yell at us.
That's true. I would. I really would because this show is amazing. Yeah, we get a few more of the like phone calls. Oh, we do see Miles kind of possessed by Quint at one point, when he touches Danny's hair in a completely inappropriate way for a child. And that's where he says the quote that we opened this this episode with. It's such a draining thing dealing with children. And I'm assuming that he is possessed at that point because he brings in the red and white roses, which we learn were Quentin's thing from episode 3. Um, I don't know, or he was trying to, figure out Jamie's key. I don't know what this kid is doing.
Well, I mean, yeah, he calls Jamie darling at one point, and she's like, "What?" And so his language even changes when he's possessed, or at least that's the impression I get. And I noticed this time around, especially when they're doing the when he's touching her hair inappropriately, and then the other time when he with Danny and he's calling Jamie darling, his one hand's in his pocket. And when he's the puppet at the end of the 3rd episode, when it gets dark and he's coming down the stairs and his whole personality kind of changes a little bit, he puts his hand in his pocket. There's just little things he does that reminds me of what the actor does with Quint. And I think those might be little signals that he's moving in and out, maybe, of what's going on.
I'm going to have to rewatch these 2 episodes, aren't I? Yep. I am.
I may be wrong about that, but I just kept seeing these little ticks that he would do when he seemed to be, his personality seemed to be changing.
Yeah. No, you're probably absolutely right.
Because he does the same thing when he's spying on Danny in the 1st episode.
Yeah. We still don't know much about Miss Gross at this point. She turns in really quickly at night, and we had already mentioned in our from the first episode the fact that she didn't come out of her room when she heard, like, we would have assumed she would have heard Danny screaming in the closet, and she didn't appear to help her. So I still don't know what's going on with her. I did notice throughout this episode she still is not eating or drinking. She turns down the tea, she turns down the gin. That there's something with her that I have not, it's not going to be good. I don't know what it is though, but it's not going to be good. The
Maybe
only
it
thing
will be.
well,
Might
I
be
mean, I don't know. The only thing that she does eat, I noticed, was when Owen basically shoves the spoon in her mouth in episode 3.
With the batter, in the past.
With the batter. The absolutely wonderful. The kitchen scenes are so wonderful when Quint isn't there. He manages to ruin them, but so yeah, I don't know what's going on with her. I'm hoping it's good because I like that character, but yeah, there's something with her that we haven't quite learned yet. But this episode ends with the hide and seek game.
Which you should never ever do, Danny. Hide and seek in a creepy manner at night.
And why did she when she started turning off the lights? I was like, since when is that a rule of hide and seek?
And
is that a rule of hide and seek?
It's not a rule when I play it, but when Flora says, or basically says, "Are you sure we should play a game because we have to be in our bed soon?" I'm like, that's there's something going on when the kid doesn't want to play a game.
Yeah. Well, and the way, this is one thing that I love, again, that I love about both this series and The Haunting of Hill House, is the way Flanagan plays with tension, and he can wind you up because you knew right away that this was not going to be a good game of hide and seek. And then Flora immediately runs up to the attic, which I was like, child, this is a huge house. You can hide anywhere. Why are you going to the attic? Like, that is not okay. But then Miles runs downstairs, and that is where Danny goes first. And you hear the open window like minutes before you ever actually see it. like it shows quite a bit of the game before you actually you hear this. It was like she's walking through rooms and she doesn't quite hear it, but you hear it. This like, I mean, it was unmistakable, like wind blowing. And then she finds later the open window. And then, of course, we see Quint and all that. But I was just like, just little details like that are so good in this show because you hear something and you're just like, that's not right. And then as soon as your brain registers that it's not right, you kind of feel like you're buckled in and you're you're on the, you're ready for whatever is coming. I was not ready for what was coming. Um Flora in the attic, that had to be one of the scariest scenes I've seen in a while.
Oh, when she
When
shushes the ghost.
when she no, no. She did not shush a ghost. She shushed a faceless ghost that was rising up and humming.
It's just trying to hum a song.
And all she does, she's not even scared. I mean, y'all, you don't even know, okay? I'm getting flushed like talking about this right now because it scared me so badly. And she doesn't even react. She just turns her head, shushes it, and then turns back. And the thing listens to her. Like the thing obeys her. So I don't know if she's like controlling things with her little like puppet dolls she has. But I did not care for that.
Well, I'm not going to answer your question about if she can control things with her puppet dolls, but
No, of course not.
I did like how in these two episodes we had a couple little hints about the dolls because what was it when Danny gets the faceless doll that sits under the chest of drawers out of that basement. Flora never really wants to touch it. She doesn't take it from Danny. She acts scared of it. And Danny says, "What's this one's name?" And Flora says, "She doesn't remember." And Danny's like, "All right." And then when Miss Jessel's playing dolls with her, and she says, "Dolls are the most amazing thing ever because you can make up your own stories." And Flora's like, "These dolls like already have stories. Yeah, they just have them. We don't make them up." And it's just these little moments of total creepiness where you're like, these dolls are important, but I don't quite understand how yet.
Yeah.
Well, should
Yeah.
we focus on episode 3 a little bit more
We
closely?
should. We should.
Don't want to
I don't know.
overlook
You
it
want to
too
jump
much.
in, Matt?
Well, no.
Oh, I just want to bring out that Miles almost chokes Danny out. So again, there's a little bit more violence toward her from the kids.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Matt. Tell us about episode 3.
Well, episode 3. Well, that would be the first of the two parts of the two faces. But as we said at the top of the show, part 2 is not episode 4. It's actually, let me see it. It is actually part 2 is episode 7. So a little bit happens in between the two. But yeah, this one, I mean, I feel like Bly Manor, one of the things that it does that was very similar to Hill House is that each of the episodes will kind of focus a bit around one of the characters, and this is kind of the Peter Quint episode. Well, no, I'm sorry, the Miss Jessel episode, and so this, I mean, this is the one that kind of has a lot of flashbacks to her and Quint's relationship and everything there, but also has the the sleepover of the adults in the present as after seeing the apparition of Peter Quint in the window at the end of the last one. So yeah, I kind of want to hear Lisa's impressions on it a little bit, just because there were some really interesting things here. I will say this: the story time was probably one of my more uncomfortable moments in the show when Miles kind of goes off script as they're doing the story, but the whole thing was just so weird and creepy to begin with.
Story time. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But but yeah, I kind of like I'm really fascinated listening to Lisa's like first time viewer impressions, especially having like since Mel and I have seen it. So yeah, what besides your reaction as well to story time, like what were your thoughts on this one?
I liked the introduction of Peter Quint, like as a person, not as the ghostly face in the window. Um, because you see him in London and it's tainted love that he like, he's like bopping to as he's, walking across the street. Um, so we see him working for Winthrop, and this is when they're interviewing Miss Jessel for the au pair position. And yeah, immediately there were things like you could see how they were setting them up to fall in love, or for her, I guess, to be enamored of him. But there were also the little clues. I mean, we already knew Quint was not going to be a good character from, everything. um, but just from the beginning, like even when Winthrop and Quint are talking about Miss Jessel in her interview, and Winthrop makes just like almost a throwaway line where he was just like, "Oh, you don't make mistakes, do you?" But the way he said it, it just, you realized, okay, this is a guy who plans out things 30 steps ahead. And he's moving people around like they're chess pieces on a board. He's always in control. He's always manipulating. He's always trying to figure out how he can get the upper hand. And we also learned that Miss Jessel gave Flora the perfectly splendid line. Because they asked her, which I just noticed too, Jamie Jamie called Danny, or made a reference to her being Mary Poppins in episode 2, right when she was having her like panic attack outside after she'd seen the broken glasses. And Jamie comes up and says, how are you doing, Mary Poppins, or something along those lines. And then when we meet, or when the kids meet Miss Jessel, they said, "Are you Mary Poppins? Are you our Mary Poppins?" And she says, "I'm not practically perfect, but I am perfectly splendid." And then that's where we get the line from. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I know Danny is taking the place of Miss Jessel, but I don't know that. Hmm. See, this is where I always start to dig, because then I'm thinking, is this something I'm going to need to know for later? Are they going to play with this more, or are they not? Or was it just something that they threw in there? But yeah, this is one of those that goes back and forth between time. So we get the kind of present people in the house. They've called the police. They're worried about Quint. They seem to think that Quint might be alive, and that he's come back because he does not know Miss Jessel's dead. And that's why he keeps calling, like, and hanging up. That's kind of what they assume. But yeah, I in my notes I wrote down Miss Gross turned down the gin and didn't touch her hot chocolate. That is bothering me, y'all. Yeah, we learned that Quint brings the white and the red roses. So, that mirrors what Miles did in episode 2. Jamie also is very angry about Quint because he cut them before their time, which I thought was a significant line. Like, he cut them before they were ready. I don't know why that's significant quite yet. but I feel like it's going to be. Because Jamie got mad at Miles too in episode 2. We also get Quint telling Miles that people have keys and you just have to find one that will make them basically do what they want for you. So again, Quint is all about manipulation and he's teaching Miles to do that. Yeah, we learned a little bit about Rebecca. She wants to be a barrister. She basically wants Wingrave's job. So she's being a little bit manipulative too, because she's seen her friends kind of go down different paths and not be successful, mainly because they're women. She gives a whole great speech about how the old men just want to know, like, what's under their skirt, basically. And so she's like, I'm going to try a different approach to it. And Quint uses that. I guess that's kind of like her key. He uses that because he talks about how he grew up poor and that he wasn't part of the club either. And so he's had to kind of, I don't know, they had like a bonding moment, but knowing who Quint is, that was really creepy too. And then there was the line when we get back to present time where they're looking at that Polaroid and Danny says they look like Bonnie and Clyde. And then I can't remember if it was Miss Gross or Jamie who says, yeah, if Clyde fucked Bonnie over. And for some reason, that line just really stuck with me. And then somebody else, it might have been in the same conversation where they said people confuse love with ownership and possession.
Yeah, that's the
Which I
Jamie
thought
and
was really
Danny conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Because Danny says love and ownership are opposites.
Yes. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Hannah and
Um,
Owen are being completely adorable.
yes, they are. Yes.
I just have to say, like,
I would.
Owen is one of my favorite characters. Like, he's just such a good guy. I love him. No spoilers though.
Well, no, and I mean we get to watch his absolute heartbreak at the end of this episode. So, but yeah, I love that character. He is I think he might be the reason, or at least one of them, that I like this season more than I did last one. I don't know. That's why I like the kitchen scenes too. I don't know.
Yeah, I love his corny jokes.
Yeah. You're wonderful. We learn a little bit more about Danny in this one with the bloody hand on the bed, which I'm guessing, again, is connected to flashlight eyes because she did not scream. Like if I saw a bloodied hand on my bed, I would scream and run away. And all she did was shut her eyes and roll the other way. So she had to have seen that before, right?
Maybe.
Perhaps.
I hate you guys. Yeah, Miss Gross sees more cracks and they're gone. Miles says, Miles wants a picnic. Miles wakes up the next morning like everything's fine and wants a picnic. And then he says, yeah, we can have a picnic once we find Flora. Which he can just drop the creepiest lines ever. Mm-hmm. That's where we find Flora in her PJs by the lake. She's screaming. Miles says, Flora lies. Which makes me wonder, we always put it on Miles as being is he the budding serial killer? Is he the one who's possessed by the evil? Is he good? Is he bad? And Mel, you pointed out that's what Henry James plays with in the original text. I feel like Flora, we are taking her innocence way too easily. her whole perfectly splendid and perfectly dreadful, and I play with dolls that have stories of their own. Um, and then he just like very flatly just says Flora lies. Like, do we uh do
But
we
is he
get
saying that or is
I
Quint
don't
saying that?
know.
That's the
Do we get
question, I think.
more? Like,
You'll have
do
to
we
keep
get to see
watching.
her being evil? Is she gonna have her episode where she goes full on evil? Because
Well,
I
and
don't
I
know.
like how, like, of the two, Flora is established in the first couple of episodes as kind of, I mean, she's the cute one, she's the innocent girl of the kids, and then you get Miles's episode where you see that the bad things that he does to get himself expelled, even if it's for ultimately the good reason of going back to because Flora needs him. But then he undercuts all of that by just saying, "Yeah, but Flora lies," because that just it 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 puts that seed of doubt in you, the viewer, of well, at least while I was watching it, going, well, does she? Is she
Right.
untrustworthy? Because I mean, of the two, I had taken her stuff more at face value. I'm always suspicious of creepy children in general in horror, but of the two, I was taking her as being more trustworthy. So yeah, I really liked that moment. I think that was a really well done moment there.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting revision of what happened in Turn of the Screw because there is the scene where Flora in Turn of the Screw goes to commune with Jessel at the lake, which we now know at that moment that Jessel is haunting Bly because we see her across the lake exactly like in the book. And it's an evil, the governess thinks it's an evil purpose, and she pulls Flora away, and Flora's in the book screaming and cursing and doing all these things, and they're like, oh yeah, she's evil, we thought she was innocent. And I thought this was an interesting revision of it because it's, same thing with Miles kind of like hiding the fact that she ran away. She goes to the lake. She's seeing Jessel, even if Danny doesn't see Jessel. Um, and then even though it's not as violent, you still have that question of, is Flora trustworthy or not? Or are she and Miles working together in some way or separately? Or it's really confusing and manipulative on the watcher as well, which I think is really fascinating. And again, that's why I'm really enjoying the second watch through because I'm seeing things differently or picking up on stuff I didn't before.
Okay. Y'all know as soon as we stop recording this episode, I'm going back and watching episode 2 and 3 again. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, okay, so at this point in the show, Quint and Jessel they've started their love affair. Miss Gross finds them in the Forbidden Wing, where he's kind of manipulated her into wearing um one of the dead mother's fur coats, and that's where we get the Polaroid picture that they're all looking at. Um, and then you get the wonderful Owen making a cake scene, which is just, I want a whole movie of just Owen making a cake. Um, and they're wondering if they should have lemon or strawberry, and he has everybody, taste it. Quint sticks his dirty fingers in the batter, which was gross. Um, and then yeah, then you really see Quint kind of be full on like manipulative villain because he accuses Miss Jessel of flirting with Owen and basically just acts terribly. And you could tell she was fully playing to him at that point because rather than just being like you're acting crazy and leaving the room, she's so blindsided, I think, by how he's behaving that um I don't know. It just, you could see how that dynamic of their relationship had already started, and so quickly how he had kind of put his claws into her and now could manipulate her. Which this is right after we get right after that scene we get story time, which Matt, you were talking about, which was, if in episode 2 the most terrifying thing for me was the attic, then by far the most terrifying thing in episode 3 was story time. Um, Even the fact that they called it story time, I don't know why that bothered me so much. Um, Maybe because of everything Flora had said about the dolls and like playing story time with the dolls. I don't know. But she comes out, she's a cat, she's all dressed up, she's calls herself Tails the cat. And then Miles is dressed like a marionette doll, and he is Poppet the puppet and proceeds to tell one of the most terrifying stories I have ever heard in my life about how Claude made him and then left him, and now they don't remember Claude when he comes back. Um, and I know that does not sound terrifying, but it was.
But Claude pulls their strings and it hurts. Yeah. And I feel like that's Quint there because we just saw him as this abusive gaslighter that like forced her to apologize for stuff she didn't even do. And then all of a sudden the kid starts telling the story about a puppet master. That's what Quint thinks he is, right? Like he thinks ahead. He knows everything. He has control. And yeah, it's creepy on many levels.
Yeah.
I love how the characters are creeped out too because they're happy when the phone rings.
I was about to say, I think what made that, speaking of what made that scene so terrifying, it was like everybody knew what story time was. So this is something they've done a lot, you know, because Jamie was kind of like, oh, God, I don't want to do another story time. And Owen was smiling. And then as, you know, Poppet the puppet is performing his story, Owen's face changes throughout the whole thing, you know what I mean? Like the smile starts to fade and is like replaced with this look of like utter horror. I think that's what made it worse too, was watching them, because then you realize, oh, even they know something is not right in this house where everything's not right. For them to react in that way. And you mentioned like Quint is supposed to be the puppet master or whatever, but like Flora kind of is too.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
she's the one with all the dolls. She's the one who basically like, you know, did story time.
But she was just a nice little cat named Tails.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Oh gosh, yeah. He pulls the strings and it hurt. Oh my gosh. Okay. No, Matt, you mentioned it is interrupted with a phone call, and they say, or one of you, and it was really, I can't even talk anymore. That scene terrifies me. But this is where we poor Owen. Like, I don't want anything bad to happen to him or Miss Gross at all. I just want to know that they're okay. But apparently, his mom, I'm guessing she passed away because Miss Gross said she was going to go light a candle, and that seems to be what she does. But seeing his grief, and she whispers something in his ear that we don't hear, and for some reason, I thought that was just a very touching detail. As he leaves, it was a nice scene. Then there was a scene, you know, something's budding between Danny and Jamie, which that's lovely too. But of course, we can't just end there, right? Because we get, and I think this is why I was calling him Headlight Boy instead of Flashlight Eyes. This is the first time we see him without a mirror, you know? There's no mirror. Danny just sees him like, and it's the first time we see him fully, like, I don't know, to me, you could see the glasses. Like before, you could just see the lights, but this time you could see the glasses that we had seen earlier. And I'm guessing it was headlights reflected in the glasses is what we're seeing. So Flashlight Boy is Headlight Eyes now in my head. I know y'all can't say anything. It's my guess that, did Danny kill him? Like, if she has his glasses, he had to have been somebody who was close to her. So a friend or a brother or somebody who was close to her.
Maybe.
Did she run him over with her car? Because that seems like, is that like what she keeps reliving? Because that's what she remembers seeing is her own headlights reflected in his glasses.
These are
I don't know.
rhetorical questions, right?
These are rhetorical questions. Do not answer them. But I mean, we know Danny's running from something. We know she's like haunted by something. And I know there's kind of the idea of like you can create your own ghost that you take with you. So that's my guess. And I'm assuming when we get her, because we, like you said, Matt, each episode kind of has, focuses on a character. And so I guess when we get her episode, we'll learn a bit more. That was terrifying. He also, like, you see him being like pulled away, which for some reason was more terrifying than him just standing there. So
Yeah,
I
the
don't know
sound
what that
effect was
about.
creepy too, like this weird scraping sound as he gets sucked into the house. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. They so that was pretty, that was terrifying. That was not as terrifying as this story of Claude and his puppets. I don't know if it was supposed to be, but it wasn't. I'm also okay. Y'all can at least answer me this: do we get like an Owen focused story, like episode that's focused on Owen?
No, I don't think so. Do we, Matt?
I don't know. I don't think we do.
No,
That's disappointing.
because
It
there's a
is.
Do we
Danny
get it?
and a Hannah.
Do we get a Miss Gross one?
We do. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know. Well, that got us up through episode 3. I'm hooked. Like it is taking some great restraint for me not to just binge the whole thing, but I'm kind of enjoying, watching it one by one and then trying to like paw through Henry James stories and find clues and it's kind of fun. Anyway. Well, listeners, I hope you're enjoying this watch through of The Haunting of Bly Manor as much as I'm enjoying watching it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you're a fan of the show, which I'm assuming a lot of you are, then we'd love to hear from you. I'd also love to hear your kind of thoughts on some of my ideas. Don't spoil it though. That's all I ask. If you want to reach out, we're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. If you'd like to contact us by email, you can do so at nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to exclusive content. So we do episodes on the off weeks for our Patreon supporters. Although I will say, we know that right now times are difficult for people. So we don't want you to feel like we're pressuring you in any sort of way. If you cannot, give to us at this time, that is completely okay. That's why we have these episodes that are free just for anybody to listen to. But one way that you can help us is by rating and reviewing us. So if you listen, for instance, on Apple Podcast, go ahead and leave us a review and a rating, because what that does is it helps other listeners find our show. It just kind of helps with that algorithm a little bit. But that's entirely free, and it does help us a lot. But you can also just tell a friend, which we would also appreciate too, that kind of word of mouth thing. So as I said, thank you for listening. We will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode, and we will continue The Haunting of Bly Manor.